Hello, I'm Navina. At my engagement party, my sister walked up behind me, shoved me into the mud, and called me a pig in front of everyone I love. But you know what's worse than being humiliated? Looking up from the dirt and realizing no one moved. Not my mother, not my best friend, not a single person said a word. They watched it happen, and then they kept eating cake. What does it mean when your entire family would rather protect the liar than stand up for the truth? And what do you do when silence becomes the loudest betrayal of all? It wasn't the typo that hurt. It was realizing they didn't care enough to notice. That single sentence looped through my mind as I scraped dried casserole off the baking dish later that night. The sounds of clinking glasses and idle gossip still echoed faintly from the front porch, where the rest of the family lingered. No one offered to help clean up. Of course they didn't. From the kitchen window, I could see them, Mom swirling her wine glass like she was auditioning for a Napa commercial, Isolde perched like a queen at the edge of the wicker love seat, surrounded by nodding heads and cameras in hand. Every word she said seemed to draw admiration. She had that kind of power. Always did. I had spent the whole day preparing, researching recipes, checking wine pairings, even ironing linen napkins. It was my first time hosting a family dinner in my own home, and I'd wanted it to be special. Instead, it became a soft rehearsal for how easily I could be erased. "Wow, didn't expect this from you?" "Looks edible," Isolde had said, slicing into the roast like she was doing me a favor. There was a pause, then scattered chuckles around the table. Not outright cruel, but enough to sting. I didn't say anything then, just smiled. That tired, social smile women are taught early, to hold peace, keep appearances, protect others from discomfort, even when it costs our own dignity. After loading the dishwasher, I wiped my hands and went to grab a glass of water. On the way, I noticed Isolde's phone sitting on the counter. The screen was lit, Instagram open. She'd just posted a story, a filtered shot of my kitchen with the caption, "Home is where I lead." I stared at it for a long second, my home, my dinner, my night. Yet the narrative was hers. I picked up my phone and opened the digital invite file for the engagement party. Thatcher had sent me the final draft earlier that week. When I zoomed in, my middle name, Elizabeth, was spelled Elizabeth. I had noticed it earlier during dinner, pointed it out even. "Oh well," Isolde had shrugged. "It's not like people remember middle names anyway." I remembered every single one of hers. That moment, insignificant as it might have seemed to anyone else, hit me in the stomach like a weight I didn't know I was carrying. Not because of the typo, but because nobody, not even my own mother, had reacted. No one caught it. No one cared. It wasn't just that I was overlooked. I was becoming invisible. Later, after the last guest left and the front porch was finally quiet, I found myself standing barefoot in the kitchen. I had a dish towel in one hand and an aching in my chest I couldn't quite name. This wasn't new. Isolde had always dominated. School plays, birthday speeches, even family arguments. She had a way of turning everything into a spotlight moment, and I had always stepped back. But something about tonight, the dig at my food, the hijacking of the invite design, that ridiculous Instagram caption pushed against the dam I'd held up for decades. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something colder, more measured. A quiet realization that if I didn't start reclaiming space in my own story, I'd vanish entirely. I went upstairs, took off my earrings, and sat at my desk. I pulled out an old notepad, one I used back in college for journaling when life got too tangled to speak out loud. I wrote one sentence: "They don't get to write my story anymore." Then I underlined it. Thatcher walked in a few minutes later, loosening his tie. He kissed the top of my head, looked down at the page, then met my eyes in the mirror. You okay? I nodded once. I'm tired of being the afterthought. He didn't say anything, just wrapped his arms around me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. It's your engagement party, Navina, not hers. I closed the notepad. We'll see. And we would, because if Isolde wanted a show, she might just get one. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror, holding my breath as I zipped up the cream-colored dress. It was soft, subtle, not quite bridal, but it hugged me in the right places. I smoothed the fabric over my hips and turned sideways. For a second, I imagined myself walking into the boutique as someone who owned her moment. Mom's voice rang from the hallway. Navina, hurry up! Your sister's already halfway there. Of course she was. Isolde probably called ahead and asked for the best lighting. We pulled into the boutique 15 minutes later than planned. Mom rushed ahead, barely holding the door as I followed. Inside, a chandelier flickered above a row of gowns lined like obedient bridesmaids. The air smelled like citrus and champagne. Isolde was already on the pedestal. No one asked how long she'd been there, but she stood tall, facing the mirror in a full-length white gown, lace sleeves, sweetheart neckline, train puddled behind her like a bride 10 minutes from I do. Oh my God, the attendant gasped. You look stunning. That's a showstopper. Isolde smiled coyly. Just in case I ever feel like renewing my vows or stealing a show. She looked at me in the mirror when she said it. I turned toward the rack. The dress I'd booked to try on had already been moved aside. I asked the assistant for it back, and she blinked, then apologized. Of course, ma'am. I didn't realize you were the bride-to-be. Neither did half the room, apparently. By the time I slipped into my own dress, a simple A-line with pearl buttons, I felt like a footnote. Mom took a few photos, but her eyes kept drifting to Isolde, still posing on the platform. She's always had presence, Mom whispered to me, as if that were a compliment. Later that afternoon, back at our parents' house, we gathered for what I thought was a catch-up session. I sat on the couch beside Thatcher, ready to discuss plans for the engagement party, venue layout, catering, playlist. But the conversation had already happened. Well, Mom announced, we decided on a seafood buffet. It's friendlier for the weather. We? I asked. Isolde chimed in, sipping a lemon spritzer. Oh, come on, Nev. You hate planning. Let us handle it. You focus on showing up in that adorable dress. The one you tried on in ivory lace? I asked. Her smile froze. Then she laughed, like I was being dramatic. The color doesn't belong to anyone, she said lightly. Besides, I looked better in it. The room went still for half a second, just long enough for the discomfort to register, before Mom clapped her hands and asked about the flower arrangements. I sat there, listening to my own engagement party being planned around me like I was just another guest. They discussed tables, seating charts, whether the cake should be 3 tiers or 4. No one asked what I wanted. I thought I was planning this, I said. Mom waved a hand. You've never liked stress. Let your sister take some weight off. She's done this before. Thatcher reached for my hand, but I'd already pulled it into my lap. That evening, after the house emptied and silence took over, I sat at the edge of our bed while Thatcher folded laundry. He kept glancing at me like he wanted to say something. Finally, he asked, "Do you want me to talk to them?" I shook my head. It's not about a party. It's about being erased while standing in the room. He sat beside me and handed me a folded shirt. Then let's write it down. Keep everything. So I did. I started saving photos, screenshots of captions, a copy of the typo-riddled invite. That selfie Isolde posted in the boutique with the caption, "One of us is marrying, guess who?" Each piece a tile in a mosaic I was slowly rebuilding, not to shame anyone, not yet, but because I could feel it happening. The version of the story where she was the leader, the savior, the beautiful one. And I was the lucky little sister she helped along the way. They didn't just take over the planning, they took the place where my voice should have been. If no one else will remember the real me, I will. That thought followed me into the next evening as we gathered at my parents' house to preview the engagement party slideshow. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and cinnamon candles, one of Mom's signature setups for company evenings. The living room lights were dimmed and a projector was set up on the console table. Chairs had been pulled into rows like it was some sort of premiere. Everyone chatted, sipping sweet tea and sparkling water. Mom was giddy. Isolde put it all together herself. She's got an eye for these things. I sat next to Thatcher, trying to keep my palms dry against my thighs. The first image flicked onto the screen. It was of Isolde and me, except mostly her. She was holding me as a toddler, grinning like a pageant queen. Then came more. Isolde teaching me to ride a bike, Isolde brushing my hair, Isolde helping me decorate a school project. I knew the archive well enough to know what wasn't being shown. My first piano recital where I stood solo. The essay contest I won in 8th grade. The day I built a backyard reading tent out of thrifted blankets. All gone. As if my entire childhood had existed only as a shadow of hers. About 10 slides in, Mom leaned in and sighed with that dreamy voice parents use when they're trying to glue over a crack. You two have always had the sweetest bond. She's always taken care of you. I didn't say anything, but inside something twisted. Because it wasn't a bond, it was a leash, and they kept calling it love. After the slideshow ended, people applauded like they'd watched a heartfelt documentary. Isolde stood to accept compliments like an indie filmmaker accepting an award. Then she turned to me, smiled like a pageant winner, and said, "Wasn't that sweet? Don't you love being reminded of how much I've always been there for you?" I managed a half smile. It was thorough. Later that night, we had dinner in the backyard. It was supposed to be informal, just close relatives and a few friends. The air was still warm, with the kind of golden light that makes everything feel like nostalgia. Then it happened. Isolde clinked her glass with a spoon and stood up. Okay, she said, swaying slightly in her heels. Let's do a little memory lane fun. How about stories of the bride-to-be? A few chuckled, unsure if it was a toast or a roast. She turned directly toward me. Remember that Thanksgiving? Navina insisted on doing it all by herself. Turkey, pies, stuffing, and she lit the tablecloth on fire. Actual fire. The table erupted in laughter. My uncle wheezed. My cousin slapped the armrest of his chair. Even my mother wiped her eyes. I looked around. No one looked at me. No one noticed I wasn't laughing. I was 11, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the moment had already passed. They'd moved on to another punchline. The story had done its job, reminding everyone that I was the little mess they'd always cleaned up after. After dinner, people slowly drifted inside to grab dessert or refill drinks. I walked around to the side of the house, took out my phone, and opened my photo folder. I'd been curating it for a few days now. My own version of the story. The real one. There was a photo of me on stage, alone, at my 5th grade spelling bee. One of the science fair ribbon in my hand. Isolde nowhere in sight. I had even scanned an old drawing I'd done in high school, signed in the corner. To myself, from myself. I opened the Notes app and typed, "They don't remember who I was, they remember who they needed me to be." Then I sat in the car with the engine off, Thatcher in the passenger seat beside me, his hand resting gently on my knee. "You want to go back in?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "I want to go forward." He nodded, and for once we didn't say anything else. Because that night I realized being edited out of your own life doesn't just happen in big betrayals, it happens in laughs, in slideshows, in remember when jokes told loud enough to drown you. It wasn't about fire and turkey, it was about erasure, and I was done being erased. She wanted the spotlight, let her stand alone in it. 2 nights later, the vineyard pre-dinner felt like a performance I'd been cast in without consent. Long tables stretched beneath twinkling patio lights, and rows of mason jars filled with hydrangeas sat perfectly aligned. I walked in with Thatcher at my side, wearing a pale blue wrap dress I'd chosen specifically because it wasn't white. I'd had enough of that shade lately. Paige was already there, laughing beside Isolde. Not just laughing, posing. A server handed them cocktails, and they clinked glasses like sorority sisters at a reunion. I watched Paige toss her hair back and lean in for a selfie. When the flash popped, I could see the hashtag Sister Goals. My feet felt heavier than my heels should have allowed. Paige and I had been close since sophomore year. She'd helped me through Dad's bypass surgery, my first job interview, the time I chipped a molar trying to open a bottle of wine. She knew every version of me that mattered. So why was she standing there like she didn't remember any of it? I stepped closer and overheard Paige say, "You've always been the glue, Isolde, holding it all together." Isolde laughed that effortless laugh she used when she knew she was winning. I waited until Paige was alone at the drink table. I didn't want a scene. I just needed to understand. "Hey," I said gently, "can I ask you something?" She blinked, surprised, then gave me a tight smile. "Of course. Do you still see me? Or just my mistakes?" Paige opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She looked down at her drink. That pause, those few silent seconds, said more than any apology could. I nodded. "Got it." I walked away, not angry, just hollow. Dinner followed shortly after. Guests found their seats under the string lights. Mom fussed over napkin folds. A family friend, Mark, tapped a fork against his glass and welcomed everyone, thanking them for celebrating our engagement. "I know Navina has something she wants to say," he added, looking in my direction. I opened my mouth to speak, but Isolde was already on her feet. "Oh, I can't resist," she said, taking the mic with a chuckle. "I've been bursting all night." She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Every word was calculated to sting while sounding sweet. "Watching my little sister finally find stability warms my heart," she began. "She's always marched to the beat of her own drum, sometimes a bit off rhythm, but that's part of her charm." Laughter. "I've always been her guiding light, even when she didn't know it," she continued. "And I'm just so proud she's getting there." I kept my face still, frozen somewhere between a smile and a grimace. The table waited for my reaction. I gave them nothing. Let her have the spotlight. Let them cheer. But inside, I was taking notes. After dessert, guests slowly trickled out. A few stopped to compliment the speech. One woman told me how lucky I was to have such a supportive sister. I just nodded. At home, Thatcher hung up his jacket and looked at me carefully. "You want to call it off?" he asked. I knew what he meant. Not the wedding, but the party. The whole public charade. I shook my head. "No, I want it to happen. I want her to see I won't play her game anymore." He didn't ask anything else. Just took my hand and squeezed it. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror and repeated a sentence until it stopped trembling. "This time, I won't stay small." I meant it. I meant every word. If silence was my armor, now it's become my blade. That morning, I was stirring honey into my coffee when I heard the knock. Not rushed, not hesitant, 3 even taps that made my stomach tighten before I even reached the door. Paige, she smiled like nothing had cracked between us. Her makeup was soft, hair tucked perfectly behind one ear. A check-in, she called it, but I knew better. People don't show up early on a Wednesday with pastries unless they're carrying something heavier than croissants. We sat in the kitchen. I didn't offer small talk. She filled the silence with updates about her brother's job, how her mom's new hip was healing. Then she looked at me like she was about to deliver a benediction. "I know Isolde can be a lot," she said, wrapping her fingers around the mug I'd handed her. "But she's your sister. Don't let this ruin the big day." I didn't answer right away. I focused on the rim of my mug, the faint chip at the edge. When I finally met her eyes, I asked, "Do you want me to forgive her or forget myself?" Paige blinked. Her throat moved like she might respond, but she didn't. Instead, she reached for her purse. "Just think about what matters," she murmured. "Not everything has to be a fight." She left the pastries behind, but they stayed unopened on the counter. I stood in the quiet for a while after she left, wondering how many people would rather see me bruised and smiling than upright and unwilling. The sky was still gray when Mom showed up unannounced a few hours later. She knocked, then let herself in before I could answer. Her eyes were watery, but not from tears, more like the mist of forced softness. She took a seat at the kitchen table like it was hers. "She's hurting too, you know," she started, unwrapping a tissue from her purse. I sat across from her, waiting. "She's always been the strong one," she continued. "Takes everything on herself, carries all of us." I almost laughed, but I didn't. "She didn't mean to embarrass you," she added. "Just keep the peace, honey. It's your party." "No," I said, voice calm. "It's not." She opened her mouth, but I stood up. "I've made a decision," I added, "and I'm done explaining it." I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just walked to the sink, ran water over the dishes, and let her see what quiet resolve looked like. That evening, I sat at my desk as the sun dipped behind the blinds. I reread the screenshots I'd been collecting, the white dress selfie, the speech transcription someone sent me, the Instagram caption she deleted after it got too many eye-roll emojis. Then I opened a new message and typed, "If you humiliate me at my party, this time I won't stay quiet." I hit send. A minute later, she replied with a laughing emoji, then deleted it. I took a screenshot. This wasn't about making her afraid. It was about making it clear I wasn't playing her sister shadow anymore. I closed my laptop and stepped outside onto the porch. The air was thicker than usual, coastal, heavy, the kind that made you expect something to crack open. Thatcher joined me a few minutes later. He handed me a glass of iced tea and didn't say anything until I did. "I think she's going to try something," I said. He nodded. "Then be ready." "I am." He didn't offer reassurances, just sat beside me, quietly in my corner. For most of my life, I thought survival meant swallowing hurt to keep things smooth. Now I realized, sometimes survival meant sharpening what they told you to bury. And my silence? It wasn't submission anymore. It was a warning. She pushed me into the mud, but I didn't drown. I woke up. The moment my hand hit the wet earth, time fractured. I wasn't just 29 in an ivory dress. I was 12 in corduroys, shoved on the school field trip. I was 16, knocked down accidentally on prom night stairs. I was 23 at Grandma's funeral, being corrected mid-sentence by Isolde in front of everyone. Except this time, I stood up. The guests froze. A few gasped. Some turned away, pretending to check their phones. The air had gone still, like the ocean before a hurricane. My arms dripped mud, brown streaks racing down my dress like ink on a blank page. I brushed back my hair with one hand. No one moved. My mother gripped her purse, staring straight ahead as if looking would make it real. Paige looked down at her shoes. And Isolde? She stood there smiling. Not a full smile, but the smug, pressed lip kind that said, "See how easy it is to bring you back down." Then Thatcher stepped forward. I caught him in my peripheral vision, his fists clenched, shoulders tense. He took one stride before I raised my hand, palm open. "I've got this," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmurs like glass. I turned toward the small crowd. "It's fine," I said. "It's just mud, right?" Someone let out a nervous chuckle. Another silence followed. I walked past them, deliberately slow, my heels squelching slightly with each step. Guests parted like a ripple in water. No one offered me a towel. No one dared. Inside the house, I moved to the bathroom and shut the door gently. I peeled off the dress, heavy and ruined, and rinsed my face in the sink. As the cool water touched my cheeks, I looked up at the mirror and saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Not the youngest daughter, not the one who kept her head down to keep things nice. A woman, mud-streaked, sure, but upright. I found one of Thatcher's flannel shirts in the laundry room, rolled up the sleeves, and stepped back outside barefoot. The party hadn't dissolved, surprisingly. People stood awkwardly, whispering in small clusters. The champagne had stopped flowing. The playlist ran in the background like a mistake someone forgot to pause. Isolde was now by the drinks table, acting like nothing had happened. As I stepped onto the patio, she glanced at me, tilted her head, and said loud enough for nearby ears, "Don't be so sensitive, Nevena. It was just a little joke." I met her eyes. "Did it feel like a joke when you planned it?" She blinked. "Or was it only funny because no one stopped you?" Aunt Susan inhaled sharply. Uncle Don shifted uncomfortably. Isolde recovered with a shrug. "You've always been dramatic, and you've always counted on me staying quiet." Then I walked to the center of the patio, lifted the microphone from its stand, the one that was supposed to be for our thank you toast, and said, "I want to say something." A few guests turned fully to listen. The wind picked up slightly, as if giving me space. "Tonight, something unexpected happened," I began. "But maybe not that unexpected if you know our history." I scanned the crowd, faces I'd grown up with. Some turned away, some couldn't meet my eyes, some looked guilty. "We talk about family as if it's sacred," I continued. "But sometimes, family is where cruelty hides best. Under the excuse of tradition, humor. That's just how she is." Paige's lip trembled. My mother looked at the ground. "Well, I'm done carrying the weight of keeping things pleasant, of being the one to smile through it. If silence was my armor, it's not anymore. I'm not hiding behind it." I paused, not for effect, but because my throat ached. "I'm not asking anyone to take sides," I said, "but I am drawing a line. Respect isn't optional anymore." I placed the microphone back, wiped my hands on the flannel, and walked toward Thatcher. He didn't say a word, just wrapped one arm around me, then guided me toward the house. Behind us, the conversations resumed, but not like before. They were quieter now, tense, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the one disrupting the peace. I felt like I had finally claimed mine. The next morning, my phone buzzed before the coffee finished brewing. I wasn't expecting anything kind, and I was right. "So sad about what happened at the party. Heard you slipped," read the first message from an old college acquaintance. Another, "Poor Isolde must have been mortified. You okay?" I stood at the counter, watching steam rise from the mug in my hand, rereading the words that had started to spread like fog. Slipped, fell, poor Isolde. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't spoken publicly. But somehow, the narrative had been drafted without me. Again, I opened Instagram. Isolde had posted a black and white photo of the two of us from when we were kids, captioned, "Family is everything, even when it's messy." The comments rolled in. "Such grace. You're handling this with so much love." Heart emojis, clapping hands. One aunt commented, "Always graceful under pressure," and topped it off with a heart. Graceful under pressure? She had shoved me face first into the mud in front of 40 witnesses, and now she was painting herself as the victim of my clumsiness. I put the phone down. My hands were trembling, but not from shock, from clarity. The silence wasn't just erasure now, it was complicity. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside for air. The hydrangeas by the porch had started to brown at the edges, and the humidity wrapped itself around my skin like a warning. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me, call it instinct or exhaustion, answered. "Nevena?" the voice asked. I recognized it immediately. Jacob, a cousin I hadn't seen since the last family funeral. "I saw what happened," he said. "At the party, she shoved you." There was no hesitation in his voice. "And I saw what she did to you when you were 6, he added. "Remember the pool?" The memory hit like a snap. I was 6. She was 11. We were at Aunt Jean's house. I'd splashed her by accident. She shoved me in. My head went under. No one panicked. Everyone laughed, even the adults. "You were coughing so hard," Jacob said. "But no one even checked on you. She said you were being dramatic." The phone went quiet. My hands felt cold despite the heat. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, voice softer than I intended. "Because I didn't speak up then," he replied. "But you didn't imagine it." "You never did." I hung up, thanked him first, but then I sat on the porch, eyes fixed on the hydrangeas, remembering how long I'd carried the shame of things that weren't mine. That evening, when Thatcher got home, I was already waiting at the dining table with the laptop open. "I need to show you something," I said. He pulled out a chair beside me. A few weeks back, Thatcher had installed a discreet camera by the back porch. For security, he'd said. The files had been quietly stored. I'd forgotten about them, until now. I opened the footage from the day of the party. There it was, full color, wide angle. Isolde walking toward me, the calculated pause, the shove, my stumble, the splash. Her words, crystal clear. "Now you look how you always felt, a little pig in the dirt." And then, silence, still faces, no one helping. I saved the clip. "You going to post it?" Thatcher asked. "No," I said. "Not yet." He nodded. Instead, I drafted a group message. Family only. Invitation to dinner. Quiet, simple. This Friday. I added one line at the end. "I have something I want to share." I closed the laptop and looked at Thatcher. She wanted me silent, but this time the silence is my proof. He reached across the table and took my hand. "If they still laugh after seeing the truth," I whispered, "then they were never my family to begin with." The house was quiet before they arrived. I lit the vanilla candle on the sideboard, not because I cared about ambiance, but because I didn't want the room to smell like anxiety. The dining table was set with plain white plates, glasses clean and aligned. There were no decorations, no place cards, no centerpieces, just the truth waiting. Thatcher stood beside me near the kitchen doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes steady. I didn't need him to say anything. His presence was enough. At 6:07, the doorbell rang. They came in pairs. My aunt and uncle first, then Mom, lips tight and coat still on. Paige came alone, eyes downcast, phone clutched like a rosary. Isolde was the last to arrive, 15 minutes late, in a cream blazer and heels too sharp for the weather. "I almost didn't come," she said, placing her purse down like a challenge. I offered her no response. I only gestured to the chairs. They filled the seats with a nervous shuffle, murmurs about traffic, weather, nothing that mattered. I stood at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I won't keep you long." Then I picked up the remote and turned on the flat screen. The video started instantly. The backyard, my dress, Isolde walking toward me, the push, the fall, the words. "Now you look how you always felt, a little pig rolling in dirt." The sound was crisp. The silence afterward was louder. No one moved. The camera caught every second, the shocked glances, the turned backs, the way no one stepped forward. And then, me rising, alone, I let it play through. No edits. No commentary. Then I paused it on the frame where I stood with mud on my hands, chin lifted. "I didn't invite you here to embarrass anyone," I said. "I invited you because I've spent years wondering if I imagined it all. The little cuts, the quiet corrections, the way my voice was replaced by someone else's version of me." I looked directly at my mother. "I needed to know if you saw it now." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "I'm not angry anymore," I added, "but I'm done pretending it didn't happen," Isolde scoffed. "So this is what? Some kind of intervention?" "No," I said. "It's a beginning. For me." She stood abruptly. "I came here to give you peace, not sit through a witch trial." "You came here to control the ending," I replied. "But it isn't yours to write anymore." She picked up her purse, her heels clacking against the hardwood as she walked out. No one followed her. Later that week, the wedding came. It was smaller now. Just close friends, a few neighbors, and those who'd stayed quiet but started asking questions after the video. The sky was overcast but kind. Thatcher stood at the altar in a navy suit, his smile soft and grounded. I wore a satin gown without embellishment, hair pulled back, no veil. We were 10 minutes from the ceremony when I saw her. Isolde stood at the edge of the garden gate, holding a white box with a blue ribbon. Her makeup was understated, but the tension in her jaw was sharp. "Peace offering," she said, voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Let's not let this ruin everything." I walked toward her. "What's in the box?" I asked. "Something personal, something meaningful." "I don't want things," I said. "I want respect." "I'm trying." "No," I said. "You're performing." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't touch the gift. Respect is not a gift. It's an entry requirement. I turned around and walked back toward the aisle, Thatcher waiting with my bouquet in hand. As I reached him, he smiled and whispered, "Still want to do this?" I nodded. "More than ever." The ceremony began. Friends leaned in. Laughter rippled through parts of the vows, and a few tears slipped quietly near the end. When it came time for me to speak, I added a line not written in any script. "I vow to never shrink again, not for peace, not for blood, not for the comfort of anyone else." The crowd rose in applause, not because we were perfect, but because we were honest. That night, as guests danced under string lights, I stood at the edge of the garden and looked out past the gate where Isolde had stood. She came to hijack my day again, but this time I didn't even need to lock the door. I was already gone. 3 weeks passed quietly, not silent, just quiet in a way that felt earned. After the chaos, the wedding, the video, the soft unraveling of stories long protected, I needed stillness, not absence, just enough room to breathe. The mornings in Savannah had turned humid again, heavy with the scent of magnolia and river wind. Thatcher and I spent one of those mornings in the backyard, kneeling in the patch where it had all come undone. The grass hadn't recovered much, so we cleared the soil and began again. We planted zinnias, lavender, salvia, anything resilient. anything willing to bloom despite the wreckage. We dug, arranged, watered. We worked in rhythm. Later, we added a small wooden sign at the edge of the bed. I had painted it by hand. Respect is a root crop. It grows if you dig. No one else would get it. That was fine. It wasn't for them. One afternoon, a thick envelope arrived without a return address. It smelled faintly of her perfume, Isolde's favorite, the one she wore when she needed the room to notice her before she said a word. Inside was a card, 3 sentences, scrawled in careful handwriting. I watched the video. I didn't recognize myself. I hope one day you do. There was no signature, no apology. I sat with it for a long time, read it twice, then folded it and slid it into the drawer I now labeled unsent. In it were drafts I'd written to her over the years, unsent letters, unsaid truths, unseen lines. I didn't add anything new. I didn't reply. Healing isn't a fireworks show. It's a series of small, quiet decisions, like this one. On Thursdays, I host a writing workshop at the library. It started small. 3 retirees, a teacher on sabbatical, a young woman named Kira who barely made eye contact the first 2 sessions. Last week, she brought in a piece about her sister. She read it aloud, voice shaky but clear. My sister once told me my voice didn't matter. That's why I'm writing now. No one spoke for a long moment after. Not because we didn't know what to say, but because we didn't need to. I smiled. My hands stayed steady in my lap. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering with dignity, and remembering who you were, before the edits, before the interruption, takes work. But it's worth it. Some evenings, when the porch lights flicker on, I sit with a journal and trace back through the year. I think of all the times I thought the ending would come like a bang, like a public apology, like a grand gesture. I thought it would feel like victory, or justice, or something official. But instead, it came in the form of no longer needing any of that. I kept thinking the story would end when I got revenge or validation or closure, but the real ending was this. I no longer need her to admit what she did, because I no longer need her. Some families grow you, some teach you how to replant yourself. Sometimes the hardest part isn't standing up to your enemies, it's standing up to your family. What do you do when the people meant to protect you become the ones who hurt you most? This story isn't just about a ruined engagement party. It's about reclaiming your voice when everyone else tried to silence it. Have you ever had to choose between peace and self-respect? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more real family stories that hit close to home.